My last chaplain supervisor came from a science background. She held a PhD in biology. That was her first degree and her first career path. And it made working with her in a hospital setting particularly fun. She never hesitated to explain a biological disease process or gross us out describing the various animal dissections that were required for her schooling. Her background in science, biology specifically, also made her particularly adept at change. And change, I don't really have to tell you, is something that most human beings resist if we don't altogether avoid it. Change actually sends our very primordial brains into a panic state. So we have like a legitimate biological survival reason to want to avoid it. Well, healthcare in America is always changing, right? Unfortunately, often not for the better. And this was especially true at the last hospital where I was a staff chaplain. We were undergoing a transfer of ownership, and that meant near constant changes from what we were required to wear to work all the way to our charting systems. And my supervisor, especially when staff chaplains were agonizing over yet another shakeup to our routine, would quip to us, "Change or die." "Change or die," she would say. Yeah, somebody went, okay. "Change or die. Only the evolving survive. Get with the times or getting behind." Unitarian Universalism is a living tradition. What a powerful thing. As UUs, we respectfully acknowledge and hold our history. We learn from the wisdom of our ancestors, but we also desire to evolve our faith to a current era. In the introduction to Widening the Circle of Concern, the report on Unitarian Universalist efforts to dismantle racism within our own institution and work for justice, it is written, "Unitarian Universalists are charged with supporting long-term cultural and institutional change that redeems the essential promise and ideals of Unitarian Universalism." You may recall that General Assembly 2022 included a contentious UUA Board of Trustees election, in which a candidate running by petition suggested that those of us who are younger or experience ourselves as regularly pushed to the margins might want to form another branch of UUism, one more in alignment with our type of people. Things she really said. She suggested we might call ourselves 21st century UUs. At a later campaign event, she doubled down on her statement that she would support others starting a new branch, saying, quote, "Don't change Unitarian Universalism." In her reflections following this election, UUA President Sophia Bentoncourt wrote, "Unitarian Universalism is a living tradition, one that evolves over time as we grapple with the largest questions that give life meaning. We have long held the values of our faith community as a people, expecting to grow and change based on what we learn together. We should be proud that Unitarian Universalism offers a way to live faithfully that remains relevant in these times." She wrote, "21st century Unitarian Universalists are simply UUs who remain active in the main priorities of our living tradition. Since the Cambridge Platform of 1648, we have held our congregations as autonomous communities who nevertheless hold themselves accountable to one another and to the collective whole. Unitarian Universalism is a living tradition. And to be clear and to make sure Sophia Bentoncourt gets all of the credit that she deserves, from the moment I said, Sophia Bentoncourt wrote, to I just stopped speaking, those were her words and her writing. In the proposed updates to Article 2, transformation would become a value of Unitarian Universalism. The proposed revision reads, we adapt to the changing world. We covenant to collectively transform and grow spiritually and ethically. Openness to change is fundamental to our Unitarian Universalist heritages, never complete and never perfect. When I think of transformation as a living value, I think of our efforts towards collective liberation, a desire to transform the world, to rebalance power, to protect human rights and encourage human thriving, to save the planet, our beloved Mother Earth, and to strive to live more harmoniously as a world community. The North Carolina Climate Justice Collective offers 4 R's of social transformation. These 4 R's are resist, reform, reimagine, recreate. Resist means working against current systems, working to tear down and to rebuild a more just and mutually thriving future. Reform means working within current systems to enact change. Participating in all systems broken in one way or another at all levels, from local government to broader political movements, from local school boards to all of the systems that transfer information, from the habitats of our own backyards to the global ecosystem. That is where reform takes place. Reimagine means envisioning a new just system. This is where our creativity blossoms and we dream up and co-create possible futures the powers that be love to tell us are impossible and unattainable. This is the moment of wresting power from the billionaire class back to the populace, the birthing of new pathways and systems of social support, tearing up parking lots to grow public parks. Recreate means creating models of new just systems. This is where our best minds and our modern thinkers begin by building small systems that lead into newer, larger networks of human thriving. Everything is connected. Each thread is woven together. We are the great web of creation of which we all are a part. Take just a moment to think about yourself and the way you approach social justice work. Are you a reformer committed to policy change? Do you take to the streets as a resistor? Do you orient to dismantling and creating new systems? Perhaps you are some beautiful mix of all 4. I think that I consider myself primarily a resistor. I'm the first one to march or to boycott or to chain myself to the proverbial fence or the actual fence. And that was an actual lesson. You might have heard me talk about my radical parents. And one of the things my dad was one of his first pieces of advice, if you were in a protest, chain yourself to something. And that's how you outlast them, you know. I also, you've heard me, well, all right. So I'm going to keep going and then I have a little story, I think. So life has taught me some lessons, right? Thankfully, I hope to be learning them my whole life. And I have come to find actually equal power in reforming. We're still learning how to wield our collective power. There is still so much actively working to keep us isolated and separated from one another, to keep us focused on infighting and in survival mode. And so until we wake up and we begin to take action as a collective, I need to do whatever I can as one person. One person cannot take down an empire, and this is really probably for the best. But one person can work within a system to encourage and inch forward reform. There are many heroes who devote their lives to a singular, seemingly small cause. This is where the ripples are. Each of our actions, each small act of resistance, each stubborn reclaiming of joy, each defiance in the face of fear is a stone thrown in the universal pond, plinking down, creating ripples that reverberate impossibly beyond the initial impact. Reform trusts the moral arc of the universe. I suppose I identify as a reimaginer and a recreator, although this is where I do tend to rely on inspiration and guidance and leadership from those who are more creatively skilled than myself. Each of us brings our own gifts, our own perspectives, our own methods and contributions to the work of social transformation. Our values as Unitarian Universalists can help us shape our roles within the movement. Our Unitarian Universalist beloved communities can help sustain our spirits in the long, hard work. You've probably heard me talk about the first congregation where I felt at home in Unitarian Universalist spaces. And this was the People's Church of Manchester, Connecticut. And Manchester is sort of a suburb of Hartford. So a lot of the folks that live in Manchester tend to commute into work in Hartford. And I was one of those people. I was living in Manchester and I was commuting to my chaplain residency at Hartford Hospital, which at the time had the oldest chaplain residency program in existence. And unfortunately, our class was the last. So during this time, I was attending this UU church in Manchester, Connecticut, and the Reverend Josh Pollock was the minister there. Now, a lot of UU ministers, including myself, it's in my contract, have a protection within our contracts that if we are arrested in acts of civil resistance, if we are arrested in a moment of civil resistance, chained to the proverbial fence, our jobs will be safe regardless of the eventual charges. And even further, there are Unitarian Universalist congregations that have funds in their finances to bail out social resistors within their congregations. So during this time that I was attending the congregation in Manchester, there was a collective of clergy, interfaith clergy, who were getting together to protest police brutality in Hartford, Connecticut. Hartford, Connecticut, and New Haven, Connecticut have had some real trouble with their brutal law enforcement. So this group of clergy had gotten together and they had linked up with this larger movement of social resistors, and they had determined that they were going to shut down one of the main highways that goes into Hartford. So Hartford, Connecticut, it's like kind of like a little Wall Street community, right? So a lot of like men in suits who were really angry about this blocked highway. So my friend, the Reverend Josh, was going to participate in this act of resistance. He was going to shut down this highway, and they all knew that they were going to get arrested. That was part of the plan, right? Sometimes that's part of the plan in protests. He knew he was going to be arrested. He had never been arrested before. So he shows up on this day, and the clergy, form this human barricade in the highway. And right before he was about to step into his human chain to become part of that blockade, he was flushed with sweat, and he was having an episode. So they had medics on duty, and they called over this medic, and the medic took Josh's blood pressure and his pulse. And at the end, she said to him, Reverend, I think you're having anxiety. And he was having a lot of anxiety, but he persevered and he went on to be successfully arrested. They shut down that highway. It was in the papers for weeks. It was a big deal. And so he's someone that I often think about when I'm encountering, my own questions about how best to be a social reformer in the world. And I think about his conquering of his own fears and his own sort of self-interest to get out there and get arrested on the Hartford highway. In our reading this morning, Reverend Nancy MacDonald Ladd says, "It is a natural instinct of the human heart to close in and imagine that only what we know is all that we will ever know, that what we face is all that we will ever face, that the only tools we already know how to use are the only tools we will ever have at our disposal for the great and terrifying work that is ours to do. This fierce desire to protect ourselves from hurt can too often result in the constraining of our imaginative power, and the new world recedes under the sheer force of our grieving for everything that passes away. Though I do not believe a plant will sprout up in a place where no seed has been, I have great faith in a seed. Convince me you have a seed planted, and I am prepared to expect wonders." Beloveds, it is so easy to lose hope. In fact, the easiest thing is giving up, in succumbing and wielding to the powers that be, to passively letting the world burn. Do not lose hope. Do not let the world burn. A better tomorrow is possible. It is possible to build a thriving, verdant world. We can rip up concrete and plant fruit trees. We can demand economic systems where all people not only have their basic needs met, but the resources to reach their highest potentials, regardless of where they have come from or their circumstances. We have the power to heal this earth that we have too long plundered and raided. We can feed and clothe and house and heal every single person, all 700 some odd billion of us. It is possible, but not the way things are right now. We can and we must dream into being and co-create the world we want to live in, the world we want for our children and our children's children, et cetera, into an eternity. It is possible. It is required. May it be so, because we make it so.